All right. So welcome back to Tangentially Related. I'm Zach,
I'm Calvin.
and we're going to talk about sports. This is going to be the sports episode. And that was another beer opening. So, I want to talk about sports because, we've talked about, we are both used to, I guess you used to, I don't know if you want to consider yourself an athlete or used to be an athlete.
I am retired is what
You're
I always
retired.
say. Yeah.
I'm more of an assistant coach right now. And I thought it'd be a cool thing to talk about because there's different ways we can talk about this. There is the idea of the competitive mindset about what it is like being in a sport and what makes some people better or worse, not just based on inherent athletic abilities, but also about the mental game that's needed. And then also about general sports, like the big five: baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, and football.
Yeah, and we kind of met through sports, so that's probably a good starting point too. But
yeah, well, do you want to talk about how we met through sports then in general, or
just briefly, I guess.
Oh yeah, sure.
So here's the thing, right? So Zach and I met through a varsity team at our school, and so it was a little bit of we're ended up being in the same program and stuff too, and all these different things, and yeah.
Well, that's how we met. We met, I think. Because I had experience in the sport beforehand, and you were just new, and we were both in first year, something like that. We were in, I think, probably the smallest. So the way that our sport went, not to give too much details, is that we met in the quote unquote beginner session, I would say, for new people. And I already had some experience, so I was already talking with some of the older coaches and being like, "Hey, I already have experience. Can I just get on the team early, right?" But you were brand new to this whole sport. And we were also part of the smallest people that came from that year onto the team. So team idea, after we did this sort of beginner session for the sport, we got the option to join the varsity team for the sport we're in. And out of the amount of people who came from the beginner session, intro classes if you want to call it, only 5 of us went? 5 or 6 of us, yeah.
Like that, yeah.
Because it was me, you, Jay.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was
they remember tall one, yeah. And then there was the one guy who joined. I can't remember his name.
So CJS, you, me, and I think that might have been.
Yeah, I think it was 5. I think it was 5 people. It was one of the smallest ones. So let's talk a little bit about sports growing up. So before then, were you ever involved much in sports then? Before that time when we met?
So yes, but also no.
Okay, so elaborate.
Here's the thing, right? To this day, I'm a pretty short guy. Well, okay, I can't say I'm pretty short. I'm on the shorter end, but I'm not really, really short. But I grew up playing volleyball, surprisingly.
Okay.
I don't know. What happened was in elementary school, some of my brothers, who's older than me by a little bit, some of my brother's friends were on the volleyball team. Well, so he would stick around after school to watch the games. And since our parents were like, "Hey, you should walk home together," because you're siblings, I waited along and I watched too. And then eventually I was like, you know what? If I'm going to be here anyways, I might as well just join the team, right, and start playing. And so I did. And then, one thing about volleyball is you got to be kind of tall. There's high Q and all these other things that kind of change that a little bit maybe for people's thoughts. But that's an anime, so not real. When you're short, you can only jump so high.
Yep.
So anyways, so I played for a little bit. And the one thing that I got really good at was serving, actually, surprisingly. Because that was the one thing that you could practice over and over again, right? Because you didn't need other people to practice your serve. You could just keep going by yourself. And so that was one thing I got really good at. And I got pretty all right at spiking despite my height. And then people started growing, puberty happened. And I didn't grow. At least I didn't grow as much. And so once the net got taller, because once you're in a different division going to elementary to middle to high school and all that stuff, right, the net gets taller. And so I didn't get that taller.
Oh, okay.
And so eventually I stopped and I ended up playing softball instead.
Yep.
And doing track and stuff like that because it's a little different. But I don't know. Softball didn't stick around as much. We had an undefeated regular season at our elementary school at one point.
Okay.
But
were you on that team?
Yes.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yes, I was. But then what happened was we ended up getting seeded against this other school in a different district that had just an insane amount of people who were on like junior national track.
Oh,
And we were like
okay,
elementary
okay,
school,
okay.
right? So we were the higher seed, but somehow we got absolutely crushed.
And you
Like,
know what? That happens a lot of times in a lot of small tournaments and such, right?
Yeah.
I'll have a story for this after the fact. But okay. But now, were you a part of the sports because of your own volition, or did like your parents want you in that, or what?
My parents wanted me to like do some kind of sport, but like they weren't particularly knowledgeable or picky about what. And so it was just like, I stumbled into it.
Okay, okay. So the reason why I'm asking that is because my history of sports is a little bit different. So I grew up as like every Canadian kid does, soccer on the soccer team. You think like, well, why doesn't he do hockey? Hockey's super expensive.
It's so expensive.
Yeah, like because think about it like this.
Also dangerous.
Well, yes, it's dangerous, and I just didn't like skating that much. I know, crazy, right? I'm like Canadian, but now I've kind of grown more into it, right? And apparently, I know people who are worse than me, which is surprising. But yeah, I just wasn't good at skating. I didn't like the falling aspect, and it's just so expensive because like you had to get the new equipment every year, and then like if you're a kid, it's like all of a sudden like it's like same thing with clothes. Every 2 years or less, you have to buy all new equipment. And hockey equipment is not cheap.
And if you buy like the oversized so that you grow into it, quote unquote, that's less safe. That is not good.
Exactly, right? So my parents were just like, here's the cheapest one. We'll give you long socks. We'll give you cleats, and they give you a shirt. Soccer, right? So you play with that for a bit.
Thing.
Yeah, and it was that was like the kids team, right? So it was like, it's whatever. It's everyone gets a chance at it. No one's really caring about the actual winning or not. They just want to play, right? So there's that. Then I got out of it, like everything, because I think I was just too much into video games. And then so funny enough, I was on the volleyball team for like 1 year in elementary school, and it was the craziest thing. It's because like they said they're going to start a volleyball team, so they asked everyone to come up for tryouts, right? So I tried out. I was like, why not? And then afterwards, I'm like, man, I suck. I'm not going to be good at this. Freaking made the team. And I was
It's
like,
elementary school, right? They basically like pull names out of a hat.
well, you see, I thought that. That's what I thought at first. I was like, oh, wait, cool. Maybe I'll get some time. So go to a tournament one time in like this school where like a bunch of different teams are playing this one area, right? Never played once. I didn't get put on at a single time that entire day. And I was just like, okay, I get it because, like, now we see sports now. It's like, yeah, if you're benched for a whole time, it's whatever, right? Because especially if you're first new on the team. But as a kid, it's like you should at least give them some mentality of like, okay, here's what the tournament's going to be. Here's who your starting lineup's going to be, and everyone else is going to be in the back.
Well, you can only do that so much when like you're like 8, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that was just kind of the worst time that I had with volleyball. That's the worst thing I ever had with volleyball. And then after that, I kind of stopped volleyball. And then I think it was like in grade 7. My mom came up and said, all right, we need to get you into a sport, either whether or not because I was fat,
the couch.
whether or not I was fat, or because I didn't have any hobbies. Mom was like, "What do you want to do?" So we open up the handbook, or sorry, the like basically catalog for sports they have in the area, right? I don't know if you ever had anything like that.
Yeah,
like the recreational guide.
Yeah.
And
that's how I learned swimming.
Exactly. Yeah. So my mom was like, which one looks good to you? I'm like, I don't know, that one. And I picked out fencing, and that's how it all started with my whole fencing, me enjoying fencing at the time, right? So I did the beginner classes for fencing like everyone else does. And at some point the coach was like, yeah, you're a little bit really big for a lot of the younger kids. We're going to put you with the adult classes as well to get better at that. And I thought it was hot shit. I went up to the coach and I went up to the coach and I was like, I think I can beat you. And he's like, really? You're like, yeah, sure, let's try it. Because I thought it was like going to be like Olympic level. And I got slaughtered. It was ridiculous, right? And that kind of took on my mindset. And so going from grade 7 all the way into high school, I just took the classes. Like I was part of the club. And I just took the classes just to get some fencing in, but I never went to any tournaments really. I was just kind of like day in, day out on the Mondays and such. Then I got into high school and I was still doing fencing. But then I was like, you know what? I want to try football because I was a bigger guy. I was like, okay, let me get into more of that. So then all of a sudden I tried out for the football team, and like, our football team wasn't great, but it was like I showed enough hard work that I made it in, and they saw some potential in me. Like I literally had a geography teacher come up to me, and say like, in like grade 10, saying like, Zach, you have a lot of hard work and determination. You ever thought about like going to being more involved in like going to like a CFL sort of thing? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm in grade 10.
Well, that's how young you have to be sometimes, right?
That's what it is, right? But the problem is that so in grade 9, and I realize this now, and I understand it is that in grade 9, I went to the first ever football game that I ever went to, like as a part of a team, and I never got to play at all.
Oh my God, again.
Yeah, again. But I'm looking
Zach,
back.
the bench warmer.
Well, I'm looking back at it now. But the biggest problem was that my mom and my grandparents were there, and they were like going to try and see me play, and all they saw was see me go on the bench.
Oh,
That was rough.
That was rough. There's just like tiny little Zach going like, oh, but my parents are here.
Exactly, right? And that's how it was a lot for the first year. But I was a kid. So we know now that if you're first year on the team and you're getting benched, that's not the end of the world.
No, it's pretty normal actually.
It
Because like
is.
you need, especially for like these like really like physically demanding sports, sometimes you just need a year to like bulk up and all that stuff, so you don't die. When
Exactly.
you're on
Like,
the field.
unless you're coming from the sport already from like a previous year, which we don't have a lot for football in general. Like basically in like elementary school, it's flag football.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you go from flag football to contact football. It's
That's
entirely
very different. That's
yeah,
very
it's very different. So all of a sudden you're on your first year and you're dealing with guys who've done it for a couple of years. It's like it's a very different sport, right? So during my first year, I got really not upset, but I just got really annoyed, right? But I stuck with it. I was doing football, I was doing fencing at the same time. And fencing, I was more in the back corner. I was like, I'm just going to keep going around because I enjoy fencing, right? And then I was just doing football because I thought my coaches were really being helpful and saying, Zach, you can be a starter next year. And that's what happened. In grade 10, I was starter. And then all of a sudden I started being placed every 2 games or 3 games. The reason why I say on the third game is because on the third game I got an injury. To give everyone an idea, I was the frontline defenseman. I think it was like the defensive end on the right side. And what happened one time was the football got run to my end. So I went for the tackle. I think I got the tackle. But the problem was someone came up beside me and took helmet right into the side of my knee. And the knee is not meant to bend that way.
Just for the record, for anyone who doesn't know, the knee is one of the most complicated pieces of anatomy in your entire body.
Exactly. It's only meant to really go forward and back. Like,
Even that's debatable.
Yeah, like you all you do is like kick it forward and kick it back, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. It's not meant like we're one of the few species that can actually stop and pivot easily, but even then that's a little bit hard on the knees.
Oh my God. Again, like for anyone who doesn't know, the knee is the most ridiculous thing ever to try to like deal with anatomically. It's so convoluted for no reason.
Exactly. So, and I don't know whether it's because of our anatomy or that's what basically made us the top species. That like,
Yeah, we have knees.
I mean, think about it. Like I learned about this. Well, I learned about this one time, right? It's like if you look at a dog has a hard time stopping right away. Like they can go really fast, and so can horses and everything else, but they have a really hard time stopping in place, turning and switching directions.
Yeah, actually. Well, I mean, it's also because they're on 4, right?
Well, okay. Let's think about let's think about this as well, right? It's basically anything. Well, that's the thing. A lot of animals are was it quadrupedal, right?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of like top apex predators, like crocodiles, lions, cheetahs, whatever, right? These like, they hunt to survive. They run in one direction. That's it. Like they can run really fast in one direction, but they cannot turn for the life of them.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us very different. Is that because of our, bipedal appendages and such, we have a very easier way of stopping, turning, and going another direction. Whereas they have a hard time doing that. So we can't outrace them, but we can just do the whole cheese strat of just going in like a square the entire time, and they can never catch us.
Oh my God.
Right? It's why they will, if they ever see an animal look at us, they're waiting because they know that once they get going, they can only go one direction, and that's it.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, so that's the way I thought about it, because what happened was when the guy hit me on the side of the knee, it basically got me a small tear in my ACL that when I try to stand up, my knee, everyone gives an idea, I'm putting my 2 fists together, and the way it's supposed to go is that the knuckles are only meant to go forward and back. Instead, the knuckles were shifting side to side on my knee, which is not supposed to happen.
That's really not good, by the way.
Exactly. So I got benched the rest of the time, obviously. That was the most uplifting thing that I had that time, because a cheerleader came over from the opposite team, came over and checked on me. And I was like, yes.
Zach's cute girl stories.
I was like, yes. And then I had like physiotherapy for like a month, for like a year, something like that. I tried to go back to it. I just couldn't. I couldn't do the same motion. So I talked to a physiotherapist. And they said, and so here's why I know about this, is because when I told them I want to keep doing the sports, right? They said, well, you can't do football. Like if you do football, you're going to need the surgery, and then even then it's not guaranteed, and you're going to have to wear a brace. and that was like super expensive. And when I went through one orthoscopic surgery or orthopedic surgery, I think it was, where they just basically they did 3 incisions into my knee and removed the flap that was kind of hanging around. So my knee's not permanently fixed. It's just they removed the stuff that was impeding me from getting the full range of motion that a knee should normally have. But they said the tear's still there, but it's not a big deal. They say that most you're going to get early arthritis at most.
Sure.
Right, and that's
not the greatest, but sure.
Not the greatest. They say like I'll probably get something like that in in my 40s or something.
Sure, we take those still.
Exactly. But then when I told them I might want to go to football, they say, well, if you want to go back to football, you're going to need full surgery, which means so when I was done surgery, I was on a cane or walkers for like a week or 2, and then I was mostly back to normal, right? But they said if you go full surgery, you're out for like 6 months in a wheelchair.
Ooh.
Because like basically
I can see why.
It's no longer just incisions into the knee; they're opening up the knee to go and check, right? So they said you're going to be out for a while, and it's not guaranteed. And yet, whenever you play football, you're going to get braced, and it could happen again.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and that's where the whole thought of like the whole CFL thing. I'm like, am I really going to do this? And I said, no, I'm an academic guy. I'm going to switch out. But then I said, well, what about fencing? They said, well, what's fencing related? Like, how does fencing work? Because, fencing is a more niche sport. It's a niche sport. So they were kind of asking how the movement was. I'm like, well, the movement's just like this. And they were showing how my knee was acting. They're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Because as I talked about with fencing, if people don't know, fencing is very much a one-direction sport. Like, we have an area that you can go left and right on, but it's, like, very small. And you don't do it as often. It's not, like, part of a good form or even like good strategy sometimes to go across other sides. It's more like just psycho your opponent, right? Debatable depending on who you talk to. So when I showed them the movement, they said, yeah, that's all fine. So I just stick with fencing. But I was still in the mentality of like, okay, I'm more with academics now. It wasn't until I got to university that I started doing the fencing more and more that's how I, one, met you, and then B, got more involved. And the reason why, and this is why I kind of want to talk about this, is that competitive mindset. Is that throughout my entire 5 or 6 years of fencing in elementary school and high school, I did not get better. I sucked. And I didn't know, like I fenced with some of the people who are here in Ontario who are like the best in like Ontario. Like every time they step on the piece, it's like, oh, I'm going to get smoked by this guy, right? And I didn't get better. And the reason why is because I didn't have the mindset. I didn't have the mindset to get better.
Most people don't, though.
And I didn't have the idea like, oh, I should try more. And the main, I want to call it the blossom or the seed,
awakening.
The awakening. Like was it in My Hero Academia? It's called the awakened, right? When everyone gets awakened, right?
Yeah.
So the awakening was when I went to my first tournament. So we went to a team tournament for the first time here in Ontario, and when I saw the team dynamic and I saw how crap I was, and I was like, I should be better than this. That just sparked a light. They'd be like, okay, I'm going to get better. Not just because I want to be like top or whatever, it's because I owe it to myself that I've been doing this for so long, and I owe it to my teammates as well that I should get better with how much training I've had thus far. And since then, I've just gone better. Now I'm basically helping with coaching.
Yeah, so like I kind of want to talk about the competitive mindset a little bit more because like ironically enough, I had the competitive mindset since I was pretty young. And it wasn't because of like directly sport. And I mentioned in a previous episode that I played a lot of StarCraft, right? And that was actually how I developed the competitive mindset.
And listen, StarCraft is technically an esport. Don't cut yourself short.
Not even technically, it is.
It is an esport. It is an esport, so don't cut yourself short.
But basically, like, there's something that you kind of have to go over and kind of like there's this hurdle to everyone's like ego, right? Where like you have to realize you're bad. And you can't blame anything else other than yourself. And once you kind of have that, that's when you have the awakening. And that's when you can start to realize that, okay, this is what I need to do. This is how I improve, whatever. It's all on me. Do everything that I can in my own power to influence things that I can and then stop worrying about things that I can't.
Yeah.
This is actually a very common thing that comes up a lot in esports titles, and that's why I got introduced to it. It's because a lot of the times you start blaming balance. You start going, oh, this character's broken. Or this race in StarCraft is imbalanced, or whatever. Oh, well, they just did this strategy. They're never actually that good, or whatever, right? You have to get rid of that in order for you to actually willingly and like truly improve.
Well, it's the call to greater. It's the call for greater potential, right? It's this idea of you are being pulled by whether your own need or by someone else's to say you can do so much better. Let's help you get there. whether it's in esports, whether it's in video games, like I talked about previously when I talked about when I played fighters, right? How I had to train to get better. But recently when I tried to play Smash and I realized I was crap, I kind of dropped it because I knew how much time it was going to take for me to get better. And I was like, I don't want to spend the time into this, right? It's different mentalities. And you see it all the time in sports as well, in like lower end sports where you see people every day walking the streets where they have so much great athletic potential, but they don't do anything about it. Because why not? Because they don't have the mindset for it. They don't want to get better. They don't like the sport, or they just don't like the idea of getting better so that way you can win yourself. Some people just don't have that sort of mentality.
Like the thing is that like
that winning mentality.
Yeah, I encountered it a lot as well, before I retired, where like people would always think that, and it goes into the idea that like everyone thinks that they're above average. That's not possible. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
If everyone is above average, then no one is above average. That's not possible.
Yeah.
The average exists for a reason.
And the best way to get to break out of that mindset is going to an actual tournament in your area. Like whether it's for esports, whether it's like an online tournament, or whether it's like, if you go for like a local,
you just have to lose over and over again.
Exactly, right? And that's the idea. Because
losing is learning.
Exactly, right? The best example I have is, so this past, was it last week or the weekend before? There's usually a big fencing tournament that happens in Ontario every year. And I watched a team that was seed. So after what's called the pools, so like the round robins, right? They got first seed, which means like, out of the 20-something teams that were there, they were number 1 at the end of the first round. And they went up against the 16th team, right? As a tableau of 16 goes 16, 8, 4, etc., right? Just in case people don't know. So I saw the team and I was like, okay, cool, they're going to win, right? Like, it's hard for them not to win unless they really shit the bed, and they shit the bed hard. They lost. Like, it was like something, it was a fencing tournament. It was like 45-43. And I was just like, how? And I talked with one of the fencers, and then I also got some back information that they just had such a bad mentality. Is that they got behind, and because they got behind, they didn't have the mentality to bring themselves back up again. Yeah. And that was a rough spot because it's one of those things where anyone, how should I put it? Anyone can, if they have a lead, they can most of the time, as long as there's like a good gap in between, or a good gap in skill, it's hard to come back up, right? Once you have that lead. But these guys, they went in thinking, oh yeah, we got this. It's a 16th place team. And then they fell behind. Now, you think, okay, well, if they're that good, they should be able to catch up. Well, they are that good, but they just didn't have the mentality for it.
Anyone can beat anyone, right?
Yeah, because once you get like, I'll give hockey as an example. Once you get like a 1 or 2 point deficit, it takes a lot of strength, a lot of mental game to hold that in place, saying like the game's not over yet. We have to try our best to get every single point, right? And that's what happened here, is that they didn't have that. So they just got behind and they just could not catch up because they started doing things differently and they started taking more risks. And then it just ended up being a win for the other team. And so the 16th team upset the first place team. It was ridiculous. It was just crazy. So I think like the mindset has to be, it's the mental game, right? It's the idea that I want to win, but it's also like, even if I'm behind, I can still win. And here's what I have to change about it.
It's really hard, right? Because you never, and this is something that, of course, right? You always have to make sure that, you have like the strong mental fortitude or whatever. And it's like really easy to say when you're like the observer looking in.
Oh yeah.
But like there's something again about sport that like, and competition in general, I guess, where you never realize what you're actually like until you get put into that position. Because that is when people's egos start to get bruised and everything. And that's the idea of, well, I'm above average. I should win this, but like you don't. Yeah. And then that's your own false kind of like thoughts of how good you actually are. And until you can get over that, it's really, really hard to actually actively improve.
I listened to one guy at a tournament where so we're in this lower end tournaments. We're getting a lot of young people coming in, and both young people from both here in Ontario, but also people around the world, right? Because some people come internationally and they say, I want to do the sport, and they go look around for local tournaments, right? So this one guy came into the tournament who's going to be around for a while, and this other person who I was talking to, who was talking to one of my teammates, he was saying, well, because that guy's here now, I'm not going to be able to win anymore because I can't beat that guy. It's like, that's not the mentality you should have. You should look at the guy and see, okay, he's a worthy adversary, and now he's entered into this game that I have to try and overcome now. Because his mentality is that if he didn't show up, he was like, oh yeah, I can now win a medal or I can win this. But now that he's shown up, he's like, oh, I'm never going to win a medal now. He's already defeated.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Right?
That's the other part.
He already
right?
walked onto, in fencing it's called the piste. He walked onto the piste already knowing he's going to lose.
The defeatist mentality.
Exactly, right?
So it's like the opposite, right? So again, it's why learning about the competitive mindset is so interesting, because like I've been focusing a lot on like, oh, your ego gets bruised, don't have a big ego. But at the same time, you actually need to also, as soon as you're in competition, say, I'm the best, I'm winning. And even if it's a lie, you have to convince yourself of that for long enough just to actually win. And so it's such a hard juggling act of making sure that you still are humble enough to swallow your ego and improve, but at the same time be proud enough of what you've done to say, I'm the best and I'm going to win.
And sometimes in a team environment, you have to admit that you're not good. You have to admit and not get bruised by it and know that you being placed on a different pool or a different pedestal by basically saying you're not as good as some other guy is, you have to put that aside and make sure you put your best foot forward. So if, for example, in like fencing team tournaments, sometimes people will think that they need to be what's called the anchor, which is like the last position. If like, track, for example, has the anchor position, right?
Yeah, when you're running the relay.
Yeah, when running the relay where you're running at the very last one, and that's usually your fastest person, right? You have to put your ego aside that, listen, you may think you're fast, but you have to admit that someone else on your team's faster, and you got to give them the anchor spot. Or you have to understand that, hey, they are not going to, that you're not going to be able to pull as much weight as some other teams, so they're going to put you aside. And you have to view it from both a ego perspective where, okay, you have to put it aside and realize that you're not as good as you think you are compared to other people. And two, you have to think about it strategically as well. The best example that I had was I was at a tournament one time. And I was coaching, and we faced this team before and we beat them, all right? And then when we faced them again in the elimination round, we lost to them. And here's why we lost to them, is because they realized that one of their fencers wasn't as good as a matchup against one of theirs. One of ours wasn't as good as theirs. So what they did, but their substitute, like they're basically their backup person, could beat that one person. So they put them in instead. The other guy stepped aside, realized he couldn't beat our guy, and realized that our sub, even though our sub is on all levels worse, their sub is on all levels worse than the entire team, his style can just match with the other guy's style and could beat him. So he went out, they put the sub in, and then took the sub out right after that. The guy put aside his ego, put aside his mentality of, okay, I know I'm better than this guy, I can beat this guy, but didn't, and let someone who's much worse than him take the spot and get them the W.
That was, oh my god. So like the thing is, like that balancing act of like swallowing your ego, of being like proud, humble, all that stuff was something I struggled with a lot actually. Mm-hmm. It was one of the hardest things to try to wrap my head around of like where I should sit, because it is like again a situation where you don't know yourself until you're in that spot. And I didn't even know it until other people started pointing it out too. I was like infamous for tilting.
Oh yeah. Like people get like all the time. Hell, I met what is it? When I went to a tournament myself, I fenced myself my own time, and this one guy got so tilted. And the way that I know he got tilted is in fencing. When you ask the ref to check your weapon to make sure that it's working properly, even though your light didn't go off, that's one way that you see they're getting tilted, because basically they're thinking that they get the point, but they didn't.
Yeah.
Second thing, he switches blades out as well. He basically just switched out the entire blade itself. So after the weapon was working, he just put it off to the side and thought that it was the weapon's fault. Didn't think about himself, and I still beat him.
Yeah, again, that's the idea of, in order to have that competitive mindset, you kind of don't blame anything but yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I got to that point as well, where, like I said, coming out of 7 years, or 6 to 7 years of technically training in fencing before going to university, I thought I was okay. And then I started fencing with other people, and they were beating my ass. And that was like the wake-up call. It was like, okay, I'm part of this team. This team is relying on me, and I need to step it up. Because let's think about it like this. You're on the team for 3 or 4, on the varsity team and at the club for like 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years.
Right? You hear that there's a person coming in with like 5 years of experience. And you're thinking, good God, they're going to be so good. This is great for the team. We're going to get better athlete, we're going to get better motivation, and we're going to get better quality of people. And then they step on and they suck because of that, right? And you're thinking, what the hell were you doing those 5 years? Like, why were you even doing it if you weren't doing like, trying out your best. And some people have that mentality, some people don't.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, that's like a bit of the competitive mindset. I think a lot of people have that. And
I don't think they do.
Disagree. Here, here's the thing. Let's not talk about sports in general. Let's talk about the competitive mindset in workplaces, right? So that's why a lot of like high competition fields, that's why when you hear like lawyer and doctor stories about how people are always competing against one another, that's the competitive mindset, just in a different area. It's no longer a competitive mindset of athletic strength or capabilities. It's about the mental and the expertise of achieving some goal for a company or for your practice, right? It's why a lot of the top end like lawyers and such, like lawyers is a very competitive game to some extent.
Sure.
Right? Because a lot of it is you're fighting for every client and you're fighting a battle in each courtroom or in each like some quote unquote case.
Sure.
Do you disagree?
From what I know and all the lawyers that I talk to, actually, it's not as much the Phoenix right objection in court, right?
Okay.
More so, a lot of like law work is advising and policy setting.
Okay.
So it's a lot less like a direct competition and more so just making sure you're not screwing up.
Okay. So maybe that is a little bit different. But my thought process is more about if I think this was from like a Jordan Peterson talk, where he's talking about how some people who have that entirely like competitive mindset who don't put it into sports, they put it into their work. And what they do is like say, I'm the best, I'm going to be as good as I can be at something, so that way no one else can say that I'm not, and everyone will say like I'm the top lawyer in whatever field, I'm the top lawyer in that field, right? And some people put that into mentality, and some people don't have that as well. It's the same thing with jobs, right? It's the same reason why some people are high-end managers and CEOs who want, like when I talk to like some higher business people, they have this mentality of, we are going to win and we're going to take this job, we're going to win this bid, we're going to win this position in the industry, and that's how we're going to get this. Like that's their competitive mindset. And you get some people who are like, maybe whether or not you want to call it me or people who are a little more complacent, who are more like, I just wanted to put in my 40 hours and leave, right? And so it's a different type of competitive mindset. I don't know if do you have that sort of way for your job, or do you think it's like, I guess because you're not working, but technically, but
Sure. I mean, like it's maybe my definition of competitive mindset is a little bit different then.
How do you think it is? Let's get on common grounds. And what's your definition then?
Because I can't go like definition. This is what it is.
Okay, what do you think it is?
But here's the thing, right? So again, a lot of my experience of developing it is from esports, StarCraft, and stuff, right? And so it is. I can't remember the exact book, but it was like it was presented. So a lot of my thoughts and stuff about the competitive mindset are kind of like through the lens of this former StarCraft commentator personality, right? So Day9, if anyone knows, right? He put out a bunch of stuff of like how to improve and how he developed this competitive mindset. I think it was him and one of his buddies that recommended this book that was actually written for tennis players.
Okay.
It was called The Competitive Mindset or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But either way, it's like it's basically how to improve and how to see faults in yourself to be the best that you can be. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily like I am chasing a goal and I need to have this like fiery determination to reach this goal. That's not the competitive mindset. That is not what I'm trying to refer to. That's why I kept calling about like egos and stuff, right? Then there's different facets to it and different ways that you can approach it and think about it. But generally speaking, it's a lot of stuff that's focused on improvement and on being in control of your own actions. So if you are, again, that's why, again, I blame, like I say, oh, I'm blaming this, I'm blaming that. That's not blaming yourself. Mm-hmm. And so having the competitive mentality is simultaneously managing your ego and then learning how to improve, right? Yeah. That is competition in the sense of almost like Darwinism, where like if you don't win, you die. So it's not this fiery determination so much as learning how to build yourself up and swallowing your own ego so that you know how to critically look at things that need improvement.
I think some people have that at first, but then when they get so good, they get to the point where they kind of skip that part of it.
I genuinely disagree.
Really?
I think most people, especially in, oh God, this is going to be a big generalization, but that's fine. I think especially in like in Western culture, there's so much emphasis on individualism that you're the star or whatever, right? That you get to the point where everyone thinks, yeah, I am the star. And that's why like there's that thing that says in a survey of like 1 million people, most people think that they're above average. But that's not possible. It's because there's so much ego attached to you and so much that it gets shoved onto you to begin with that in my experience, most people that I meet don't have the ability to say, oh, that was actually my fault, or oh, that was something that I could have done better. Their first instinct is always to blame something else or be jealous.
Okay. I think we're hitting two different points then. I think what I'm talking about is, let's talk about I'm taking more of an example where someone knows they're good and they get exemplified by it by going to different tournaments. So I'm talking from a very sports side of it, where someone thinks they're good, goes to a tournament, does well for what they're doing for it, and then it just keeps having a positive reinforcement after that, right? I think what you're talking about is the complacency for mediocrity.
Sure.
Right? Which is that it's the idea of there's no winners or losers, there's just a participation ribbon, right?
Not necessarily.
Well, or there's no winners or losers. That's the idea. Like everyone's a winner in whatever case.
No. That's not what I'm getting at. No, what I'm getting at is that and I'm going to actually just start throwing shade. There are a lot of people that will you first meet and they say, oh, I want to do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, cool, all right. So it's a lot of hard work, but if you do, A, B, C, you can start doing X, Y, Z. They want to skip the whole, I'm going to build, learn my ABCs because, well, I'm so good. I should already know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And so there's this humbling that you have to get and you have to accept. And most people that, in my experience, don't have the ability to be humbled and still be okay. They'll start blaming things or quit.
Okay. Yeah, but that's the mentality of but that only gets fostered by the idea that they are told their most of their lives that they are always a winner, that everything they can do is good and nothing can ever be bad. That idea that gets fostered by that original idea of participation trophies, where there's no winners or losers, it's just everyone wins, right? Everyone gets the same reward no matter what. And then all of a sudden you go into a real life event like sports, workplace, jobs, projects, whatever, and you get into those scenarios where all of a sudden you're not doing as good as you think it is. And then you're saying, well, it can't be me because I did so well all these other times. It's the system's fault. It's the person I was working with. It's the teacher. It's the referee. It's whatever. They start blaming other things. But I think that starts from the original mindset of you did. It starts from the original mindset of you not being told that you're not good enough. You're not being I'll go back to my personal example. If I was never benched on volleyball, if I was never benched on football, if I didn't go to that first tournament in my first university for fencing, I would have never been humbled at that point. And I think it stemmed from all those beginning points where I got benched because I wasn't good enough, where I wasn't valued as much because I didn't put the work in, right? But some people don't get those experiences, right? Some people will not do their first sport until they're a young adult or even older. Right?
Yeah.
And so the entire time they're just going through this system of being told that everything they do is accepted and great. And that's from a fear from the parents' point of view where they don't want their kid to be upset and sad.
It's also just a little bit of you getting out of your own comfort zone, right? Because that doesn't happen if you don't let it when you're young.
But people will not get out of their own comfort zone unless someone pushes them out, right? No one wants to be out of their comfort zone. That's why it's called a comfort zone, right? Yeah. But other people have to push them out of it, and it's going to be upsetting, it's going to be sad, it's going to be not a good thing to happen, but it has to happen for people to grow, right? That's part of one of the inherent things that people need to grow up dealing with is getting out of your comfort zone, whether you want to or not. Because most of the time people aren't going to. I heard I was visiting my mom the other day, and she was talking about her boss's kid, how she couldn't even make a phone call for making appointments or anything like that because it was out of her comfort zone, and her father was pushing her out of it. And it's going to be a messy thing because basically you're telling your kid no and not to do it. And by the kid is 19, 20 something.
Oh.
Yeah, 19 or 20. Yeah, no, it's not like 15 or younger.
In my head, they were 8.
No. First year of uni.
Oh my God.
And they're being told that they have to make a doctor's appointment themselves. And they say they can't. They've sent messages and they sent emails. And the father goes, give him a call. And then the daughter's like, I don't like doing calls. It's too much stress.
Yeah.
Right? And so the father's pushing her out of the comfort zone. It's a messy thing, but it has to happen because that's the only time people will grow is when they're pushed outside of what they're normally able to do.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about getting into competition, right? Because you sign up for that.
Yeah.
You sign up for being pushed out of your comfort zone. And then once you're outside your comfort zone and you don't know how to like properly respond to things, that is where growth happens. So like that's why in hindsight now, the fact that I've been through these like competitive things where you learn how to deal with yourself and how you respond to certain situations is really good. And I'm glad I did it. At the same time, though, it definitely could have been healthier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people have different ideas of what is considered a healthy mindset or not. Some people consider working out 5 times to 6 times a week for like 5 hours, 6 hours straight is healthy. And some people will think that doing very little is also healthy as well, right? I think it's whatever works best for the individual. Like, I remember I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and he had this Muay Thai champion on there. And he was saying, whether or not it's true or not, I don't know. Like, you can look him up. But he was saying that, so he works out, does like all this jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai stuff for like 8 hours a day. And all he eats is like carbs at night, like pasta and pizza, essentially. Because he's grew up from an Italian family. And that's it. That's how he trains. That's how he eats. To any other person, that would be a horrific diet. But to him, apparently it works.
Yeah.
So, like, that's my big thing about like a lot of dietary health stuff is that, there's a general guideline, but you really just have to figure out what's best for your own body, right? Like, I think because sometimes the what's considered healthy gets very skewed, not towards something healthy, but towards whatever company wants to make most money.
It's debatable.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's on a spectrum, right? But all I'm saying is that you really have to decide yourself and and objectively look at the results. So not just say, like with someone's 300, 400 pounds, right? And they say, oh, I'm healthy. You're not really looking through a very good objective lens, right? And then you have to think about how you can mitigate that. Now, obviously, there's external factors and such, but you really have to think about things from an objective point of view, which is where that competitive mindset happens, where you're looking at your results and how well you're doing from an objective mindset, not from a speculative or subjective mindset.
Yeah.
Where you're thinking, oh, well, if this was different, if that was different. No.
Yeah, that's shifting blame.
Exactly, shifting blame. You went into this competition or this area, and you did, and your result was this. Look at all the reasons why, and look at the ones that are in your control and which ones are out of your control, and work on the ones that are in your control. For me, when I was getting better, it was losing weight, and it was training more, specifically on fencing. That was the 2 main things I did, and I got a lot better. Right? Everything else is on a per tournament basis. Whether the ref, I don't blame the people who are there. I look at the roster of people who show up, and I'm like, and I have a good idea what's going to happen. I went up against this guy who I knew I wasn't going to beat, but I was like, I got to try. I think I got whipped like 15-4. but it was just like, it's one of those things. I didn't go in defeated. I went in, I'm going to try and win first, and then afterwards I just started trying stuff up. Because even when you get into those losing situations where you can't get back up, you just got to start trying new things. I think that's what some people don't really do, is like, especially with fencing and then with other like individualistic sports, with StarCraft or things like that, where people get into one type, one maneuver, one situation that they're really good at and nothing else. And all of a sudden that situation doesn't happen anymore, and they get completely lost and they don't know how it happens. So like, as you said, like, that's where growth happens, right? And those are times are the best times, because now you can take that, write it down, memorize it, and then go back and work on it in your training time.
That's the key. You have to go back and work on it, though.
Yeah.
Because that's the second part of why I disagree that like people just don't have the competitive mindset, because there's 2 parts, right? It's one is identifying it, but the other is actually following through on what is actually the problem.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They'll say, oh, I didn't do this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, and at the very least, say, if someone who is more knowledgeable says, hey, you did this wrong, like, sure, okay, you're more knowledgeable, I'll believe you. But then they don't go back and actually try to fix it.
Oh, yeah. It happens every single time at every single tournament I go to. When I go and coach people and they ask, what can we do better? And I start telling them what they can do better, and they don't do it. because they know what has to be done. And I tell them what has to be done, and they just can't follow up with it. It's why a lot of the coaches on the team that I'm on, they have the capability to get people to higher places, but it's just the people just aren't committing enough sometimes, right? I think it's okay, barring what that look you just gave me, it's half and half. Okay, it's half of the coach wants to put in the time, and has to be the fencer has to be able to put in that time. All right, because for a lot of like little league or lower league sports, all the coaches are they're taking their own time. to work on everything, right? They're not getting paid for it. It's basically a hobby or, just a side activity for them to do. But if we were paid, maybe that'd be different. But in fencing, especially if you come from, to give an idea, in a lot of clubs in fencing is like paid for. You pay for the lessons, you pay for the time at practice, and you get that time to work with the coach, and they'll do that for you, right? But that's because you're paying. And if you're in like a more of a school sport, you don't get that luxury. It's like you're with the collective, and maybe you'll get a couple practices with the coach individually.
That's
but
not how
other
it should
times
be,
for you.
though. In fact,
It's not how it should be.
because you're paying due. You pay like all the varsity fees and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. But that's a different conversation. That is based on the club that you're with, because they'll have different structures set up for how you pay and how much you get from what you pay for, right?
That's true. That is true.
Like, for example, the school that I'm with has a fairly low fee, but because it's geared towards a very certain type of fencer and type of people than it is if you were to get paid for the higher fee, but you get more from it.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, because like I went external and I started paying for stuff externally, and okay, now here's the difference though. Even on their like lowest tiers of payments, I got so much more out.
Really?
Of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is potential, yeah. But I think the other problem is that
But I'm retired now, so it doesn't matter.
yeah, that's true, yeah. But I think it's also about like how the whole system's set up from the get go, right? Like if like for fencing, for example, you'll find out with a lot of fencing. I don't know if it's like this in the U.S., but in Canada, at least in our areas, it's very common where a very well-funded program that's part of like a school is usually tied to the city. So there'll usually be two different clubs, so to speak. There's the team club for school, and then there's the city club that you get most of your money coming in from, because not only the city's not paying you money, it's because you're getting people in that area who just want to come out and try it and will pay for the lessons, right? So that you have that good moderation where you're funding your school sports that are going to have the higher tier athletes most of the time. Sometimes it's also on the city side, and then you have the city programs funding the team over to help out with the school once your school just gets better and better.
Yeah.
Right? So if you don't have that outside club to help fund it, then you're kind of stalemated, and you have to deal with whatever fund you got from the internal sides of the school, which is very rough.
Yeah.
I think like Canada, I don't know if it's Canada, but in Ontario specifically, like a lot of sports have gone downhill.
Well, the thing about Canadian sports in general is that like they only fund a couple of things, and there's only like even then
The Big Five, I said.
Yeah, and
it's I'm going to reiterate one more time because I was going to talk about this. Baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, and football. Those are the Big Five. Maybe you get curling. Maybe you get, and you also get some tennis now.
Isn't lacrosse technically our national sport?
I think lacrosse is, but I have not seen a lacrosse game. I don't know how long.
Yeah,
I can never
know.
find it.
Like,
but those are the Big Five.
Yeah.
It's basically anything that you can get a seat into. You can buy seats for.
Yeah,
like auditorium games. And curling is like only really big on the during Olympics, or I think it's called like the Briar Cup. I think it's called. And I only found this out the other day.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
And then tennis, it's like Wimbledon, right?
I don't know, man. Like I'm a video game esports guy. I can listen and talk about all these different esports because that's what I grew up with.
Exactly. But esports is even whether you want to call it easier or harder, right? Because it's easier because you have everyone in the same room. You can just flash it on screens, and that's like basically real time. You're not really missing anything because you're seeing the exact same thing that everyone else is seeing. Yeah. That everyone on the screen is seeing. But the harder part is that it's an esports. Everyone probably just streams it.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you get people to buy tickets and get money for stuff if it's just being streamed on Twitch or something?
It depends, right? Like I've never been to a live event. I've always wanted to at least like go at least once, but like, and there have been a few things that have happened in like the neighborhood for different things, but like, it was that like I don't feel like paying to like go there by myself, right? Yeah. Because like I don't really talk to too many like close friends about like esports and stuff because it was something I grew up kind of like nerdy with by myself. Yeah. And then I just kind of let it be. Nowadays, I don't even play that much. Like we talked about it before, right? I'm too burnt out trying to be competitive. Yeah. So I just hang out and like watch a game here or there.
Well, that's what it is all the time, right? Where people who are doing these sports, they just do it as a pastime or a side time activity, and they are just happy with where they are, but they don't want to really improve too much. Everyone wants to get better, but no one wants to actually put in the amount of work that it takes to get better. Right?
Yeah, but like there's one thing of like recognizing that's what you're doing and not.
Yes, that is also true. I mean, yeah, some people will have just such an ego trip that they will just walk on to like a field and be like, I'm great.
That's
I'm so
happened
good.
way too much in my experience because like a lot of the things that I've started like getting into have been more niche, and because like if I like show up and like try to like play a chess grandmaster, I played a little bit of chess here and there. There's no way I'm gonna like think that I'm gonna beat them.
Yeah.
But like if it's a more niche thing, it's like, oh, how hard can it actually be, right? And so you kind of show up and say, oh, I could do this or whatever, and you have no idea what you're actually getting yourself into.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's just also not very good knowledge of like who you're going against, right? Like I think what was it? And here's another point to her whole side sports one is that I one time wanted to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh back in like I want to say it was in
I told you I played YCS Yu-Gi-Oh!
I know,
Right?
exactly. I know you told me that. So I wanted to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh, and I brought like a very old deck. But this is at the same time that Synchro and Link and Pendulum summons were happening.
God.
So I come in, I just get destroyed. It was brutal. And I even watch videos about it now. There was a video by the Ackman. Check him out if you haven't. He talks about why Yu-Gi-Oh was so awesome, but also so complicated and what happened to it. And he's talking with all these different Yu-Gi-Oh streamers who are saying like the game has gone so complicated that it's ridiculous for any new person to start, and it's gone so complicated that even veterans have a tough time following it. There's a picture. Apparently, there's a recent Yu-Gi-Oh tournament that happened recently that got
YCS
streamed.
usually happens around this time of year.
Yeah. So apparently it happened recently, and there's a picture that's floating around where there was like 20 cards face up on the table, and somehow it was a match going on. Even the commentators didn't know what was going on with how bad it was going.
Yeah. I hold, by the way, that I played YCS Yu-Gi-Oh when synchro summons were like peak.
Okay.
And I still say, and I'll say this to anyone who is even interested in watching anime in general, right? You brush aside children's card game and all that, right? Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds was the peak of Yu-Gi-Oh.
So
it
I've
is
heard.
something that everyone can like enjoy, whether you are like actually into anime or not, whether you're actually into card games or not. The anime 5Ds was so good. It had everything. It had like friendship betrayals. It had cults. It had mythology. It had everything.
You know, I heard about that because I think the reason why is because the 5th season, that was just a series finale of the Yu-Gi-Oh, didn't end too well, and then GX was just a mess.
Oh, God.
Like no one liked GX. I kind of like GX, but that's because I grew up with it as a kid. And then I think 5Ds everyone just really liked, and then since then it's just
Well, it's also
gotten worse
because
and
during
worse.
that age, right? During the 5Ds era, the game was
Card games on motorcycles.
okay, scratch that. It's just like the game itself, the pace of it was good, right? So previous, and this is going to sound awful to anyone who doesn't know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh, but previous, right? A lot of the game was I summon this monster and I wait. Or I have to get 5 or 6 very specific cards before I can actually make a play.
Got it.
What Synchro Summon introduced to the game was the ability to have combos for cards that weren't specific. You could
Okay.
combine, well, they were specific in the sense that you needed types, but then these types could be generically anything. You needed a tuner and you needed other monsters. And so anytime that you summoned out all these other monsters and you could like, you know, have any combination of them, as long as their level summed up to some number and you had a tuner and some other monsters, you could bring out a stronger monster. So now you can make plays. You don't have to play your one monster, wait, play your one monster, wait. You didn't have to like sift through the game, go through like 8 turns to find, polymerization and like 4 cards. You could literally make plays just from any hand you had.
Got it.
So the game pace sped up exponentially, and that's why, you know, they were on motorcycles and stuff. they even did it in the show, right? It's like a speed world now, you know, we go fast.
Exactly. Okay.
And so
okay.
that's why Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds was so good. It wasn't needlessly complicated in the sense that there were like 6 or 7 different like Pendulum, Blink or whatever. It was literally, if you still want to run your fusion stuff from before and like sift through your turns to put together those combos, great. They were a little weak, but it was still doable. Mm-hmm. But the heart of the game was literally just make plays with whatever cards you had on hand.
Got it.
And it actually went to the extreme. So the one deck that the 2 decks, but the one deck that I played the best, and apparently Canadians are just known for it back in the day, was the Infernity cards.
Okay.
So the way Infernity, the deck works, is all of the plays and all of the combos go off when you have no cards in your hand. You're constantly all in. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's exactly what it was. You had to make do with whatever you had in your hand and all in all the time. It didn't matter. Right?
Okay,
You got to get rid of every card in your hand. Put it down, summon it, doesn't matter. If it's going to get killed, it doesn't matter. You have to go with it all in all the time. And it was so much fun because it was always just a lot of like...
Yeah, you're going all in, all the way to the wall, right? So I went to a tournament, just to go back to that, I went to a tournament and I got beat up entirely. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to get back to this. And the main reason why is because I didn't want to pay, like, you know, there's a huge, like, cost for Yu-Gi-Oh! To buy the cards, and you got to find the right cards, and you got to put together the right deck, and then all of a sudden there's a new pack that comes out.
That's how I made friends.
Exactly. I know. There's a lot of things like that. We can talk about TCGs another time because I have a bunch of other rants about TCGs. But yeah, some people just don't want to put in the effort. It's sometimes sad to see, but I think it's also because people want to put their time elsewhere, and it's like it's about what they care about, right? The amount of times that where we see people walk on to like teams and they have so much potential and they just drop, and the main reason why is because they just don't want to do it. They want to put in the time. They have other busy stuff they want to do. It's sad to see, but it's just like that's how life is, right? Like people will just walk away from it. So it's really too bad. Anything? I wanted to talk a little bit about like sports in general, about like watching it, but we're getting close to the 55-minute mark. You want to have any last thoughts about competitive mindset?
Oh my god, I could keep going because I feel like before this, I didn't realize that the two of us had different thoughts on what we defined as the competitive mindset.
Yeah, well, because it's because I think you had the best example of it is that you wanted to do StarCraft and you got your inspiration for the mindset from a tennis player. It's all the same idea, which is different ways of manifesting it to your person, right? So, you can still take, as you just showed right now, is that you can still take what you learned from a tennis player and how they got better and apply it to apparently StarCraft and make it just as good. So I think people really need to as much as you think like, oh, I'm not a competitive person, you probably are. You're just manifesting it into a different way. Not everyone has to be competitive and be in a sport. You can be competitive in your job. You can be competitive in a hobby. You can
That's true.
Like the amount of times that people get pissed off when they play Monopoly, right? It's not because people have this mindset they want to win, but they hate it because Monopoly is all random based. It's all dice based.
Yeah.
So they just don't like that. It's not in their favor. That's the worst times, right? Is when you want to win something, but then it's just a completely random chance. That's what people get pissed off at. That's why people don't like Monopoly.
Aren't there actually strats in Monopoly though? There's like any time that there is an actual like choices to be made, it is optimizable.
Yeah, no. It is, but it is almost entirely down to what you roll. And I'll tell you what the strat is right now because I actually like Monopoly. People don't like it. I like Monopoly, but I tell them like, yeah, I love Monopoly. I like it because it's a fun game and because it's a random game. All right. Pseudo-random.
Because you make choices, right?
Yeah, you still make choices, but it's largely based on dice roll, which is the best board or properties to get in the game is the if we go off of original Monopoly, purple and orange. And the reason why, and then anything in between there. Anything in between the jail and the go to jail spot. Those are the best spots. And the reason why is because people go to jail most of the time because there's a spot for it, and there's like usually one or two cards in the chance and treasury deck, depending on which version you're playing, that will have a go to jail card. Oh. And so what happens is, so let's think about it like this. We have a square board, right? 10 spaces on each side. You go, everyone starts off at go, you go around, you get all the way to go to jail, and you go all the way around, and all of a sudden you land on jail. You go all the way back to jail, which is on the side where the purple and the light blue meet.
Oh.
Right? So if you get a jail, what's the first properties you hit? The purple and the orange. And then following that is the red and the yellow.
Oh.
So people are going to go to jail more often than not. And then if you own a property right after jail, there's a higher chance, not guaranteed, higher chance they're going to hit your property and you're going to make more money. No one hits the green. Even though the dark blue is the most expensive one, and it's basically like what we call like the nuclear bomb that gets set off if you get enough houses on it, no one hits it. Reason why is because it's right after the jail.
Oh, see, the thing is, I thought for most board games, especially like we'll use Monopoly here, right? Because I do a lot of statistics work. If you throw 2 die, right? There actually is a distribution of like what is more common.
7, no. Yeah, it's
so it would be multiples of 7 and the numbers close to it.
Yeah.
Which would be the properties that you would hit more often.
Yeah.
Right. And so you would actually have a bunch of like distributions of like probabilities, and you would actually have certain spots that are higher.
Yeah, no, and that's why you've played Catan, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Catan exemplifies that. How was it 7 and 8 are the most common die rolls, and so that's why they're always the ones that get hit by the robber or the ones that are considered the red marks. Right?
Yeah.
And then everything else is like that distribution. They literally show the distribution in Catan because the 7 and 8s have 4 dots. The 9 and 6 have 3 dots. 5, 4, and then I think 10 and 11 have like 2 dots. And then like 1 and 2 and 12 have like 1 dot, which means those are like the very far end of the spectrum. right? So that's what it is. So Monopoly has it where the common, like Monopoly isn't a best example to show that distribution because it doesn't really matter. You don't want to get 7 every single time. In actuality, you just want to get whatever number lands you on those properties.
Well, okay, there's what you want and what's actually happens, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I had a friend in high school. We played Monopoly, and he kept saying like every single time we played like a dice game, he's like 7, 6, and 7, and 8. Most common die rolls with 2 dice. If someone says that they need 7 or 8 to get someplace, he gets worried, and if they need 7 or 8 to land on his property, he gets excited. So that's the strat for Monopoly. In case people ever want to know, is like the idea is that if you can buy the properties anywhere between the jail and the go to jail spot, those are your highest chances for success. Because though, especially very more often, the orange, all right? Because think about it like this. You need a double to get out of jail, all right?
Yeah.
All right? And most of the times the doubles are going to be like, or even if you don't get a double, you have to get out of jail anyway and move that many spots. What's the most common number? 7 and 8 from a 2-sided dice. What's at the 7 and 8 spot? The orange properties. So anytime someone goes to jail, if they don't roll out with doubles and they just roll natural die, they're more likely going to hit your orange. So that's the one. So basically, the order of properties of what you want to get, if you have the option, like obviously at the beginning, you basically want to gather all the properties you can, but then it basically just comes down to who owns the orange, purple, and then eventually the red and the yellow properties, because that is what really determines how to win Monopoly. And that's where we're going to end it off there, is that's how you guys beat Monopoly, because we're right about the hour mark. Thank you everyone for listening. I'm Zach.
I'm Calvin.
And thank you for listening to Tangentially Related. If I didn't say it before, I'll say it again. Like, comment, subscribe. But you know what? We're doing this for fun. So do whatever you want. Cheers.